Hello everyone, my name is Naguura, and today I will tell you everything you need to know about Black Rook Hold in Dragonflight Season 3. Black Rook Hold has been brought back from Legion and is now a part of the Season 3 Dragonflight Mythic Plus pool. The dungeon has 4 bosses and is pretty linear. The trash at the start of the dungeon can be pretty dangerous, that's why back in Legion teams used to skip everything up to the first boss. The reason why it's difficult is mainly because of the Protectors and Retainers. The Protectors channel Sacrifice Soul, a spell that can't be interrupted, reducing every mob's damage taken by 75% for 15 seconds. The Protector himself, though, will take 200% increased damage during this channel instead, so make sure to use your full single target rotation on the Protector to finish him off quickly. The Retainers cast Soul Blade on random targets, applying a really nasty magic dot on players, and this debuff stacks, and because there's so many Retainers in these early trash packs, you usually don't have enough magic dispels to get rid of all of them. You can also use disrupts like stuns and disorients to stop the cast. The Counselors should be interrupted on their Dark Mending cast because it's a heal. Additionally, they cast Soul Blast at random targets, so use additional interrupts on those casts. Depending on going left or right at the start of the dungeon, you will encounter different mini-bosses. On the right side is Lady Illysanna Ravencrest. She will cast Glaive Toss at random players, throwing out the glaive that chains to close by players like a chain lightning effect. On the left side is Lord Etheldren Ravencrest, casting Spirit Blast at random targets, dealing damage if not interrupted. Additionally, he also applies Soul Echoes to players, causing the debuff player to drop mirror images of themselves every second for 10 seconds. They detonate after 4 seconds, dealing damage to everyone close by, so make sure to stutter step with the debuff to not get hit, but also not drop the images all over the place. The first boss in this dungeon is Amalgam of Souls. The boss occasionally casts Whirling Scythe at random players. This will throw out a scythe at the player's location, hitting anyone in its path, and continues to swirl at the final location. Make sure you dodge the mechanic as it can do quite a lot of damage. The boss also casts Soul Echoes, causing players to drop mirror images of themselves, the same mechanic as the mini-boss I talked about earlier. The tank has to watch out for Reap Soul, a 180-degree arc in front of the boss. Don't aim this into the middle of the room and make sure to dodge it. The tank should dodge the ability as well after aiming it correctly. At 50% health, the boss starts casting Call Souls. Ads will spawn around the room and slowly walk towards the boss. If an ad reaches the boss, he gains a stack of Soul Gorge. After 30 seconds, the boss casts Soul Burst, a big unavoidable AoE damage. Each stack of Soul Gorge will increase the damage by 30% each, so make sure to not let any of the ads reach the boss. The ads can be slowed, rooted, and stunned, so technically you can just see the ads instead of killing them, because the boss still takes full damage during this phase. After the boss, there's a roleplay sequence before the door opens. Once you can walk through, you will reach a staircase filled with Rook spiderlings and the Matriarch. The small spiders stack up a magic dot on the tank, which should occasionally be dispelled by the healer, and the Matriarch only does melee damage to the tank. The next floor is filled with undead enemies. The Risen Arcanist casts Arcane Blitz at random players, and if not interrupted, the target takes damage and the Arcanist gains a 50% damage buff. Make sure to focus the Arcanist and don't let the magic buff stack up too high. The arcane minions teleport to players continuously, indicated with a swirly on the ground. It might be beneficial to not position yourself in a way so the ad jumps far away from the rest of the pack, because then it might die really slowly. The Risen Archers are hunter-type mobs and continue to shoot at random targets within range. They also occasionally jump to a player's position and cast a frontal arrow barrage. The cats sleep at random targets, applying a bleed to them, and the scouts occasionally cast Knife Dance, which is an AoE damage channel and should be disrupted with stuns or disorients. After clearing the room, the mini-boss commander Shemdason spawns with other trash mobs we've already seen before. The pack will aggro the group on spawn, so be prepared. The mini-boss himself only casts a frontal stun towards the tank, but the rest of the pack is more dangerous. A lot of the mobs here do physical damage and they can be line of sighted, so if you get shot too much by archers or there's too many knife dances and you don't have any disrupts for it anymore, then make sure you run around the pillar, and it might also be beneficial for the tank to tank the mobs close to a pillar to give melee players the opportunity to line of sight some spells. Next up is Illysanna Ravencrest. In phase 1, she targets random players with Brutal Glaive, dealing initial damage and leaving behind a bleed. This glaive jumps to nearby players, so make sure to move away from the group if targeted. The boss will also target players with a red arrow. She then charges towards the players in order, doing initial damage and leaving behind a blazing trail. Try to position yourself properly to limit the amount of area of denial being created by her charge. At full energy, she will rise into the air and target players with eye beams, indicated by the fixate animation over a player's head. The beam leaves behind puddles in its path and should be guided in a space-preserving way. During this phase, 2 adds will spawn as well, a Vanguard on the right and a Risen Arcanist on the left. The Vanguard can technically be CC'd with a root or something similar before it reaches the boss room, and it can just be ignored until the end of the boss fight this way. The Arcanist should be focused down and interrupted as much as possible so players don't get killed by arcane blitzes. If you decide to not CC the Vanguard, make sure to face the frontal stun away from the group. Next up is the staircase towards the next floor. Be very careful when approaching it because there are large boulders rolling down on the right or the left side of the staircase. If any player reaches the top, the boulders will stop spawning. On the next floor there are different kinds of demons. Scavengers cast Drink Ancient Potion. This will cost 1 out of 3 outcomes at random. Either they cast a frontal fire breath, they spin around knocking back players coming into contact with them, or they gain a stacking damage buff. The Drink Potion spell can be disrupted with stuns and disorients, and you should do so as much as you can. And lastly, the Blade Lords deal heavy tank damage with their Brutal Assault. Make sure to disrupt the cast with stuns or be ready with mitigation. Once you made it through the second staircase with rolling boulders, you can walk up the final stairs before the next boss. These stairs are filled with Felspite Dominators and Bats. Bats keep spawning until you defeat the last 2 Dominators. Dominators cast Sick Bats, which makes all the close by bats fixate one player, and this can be incredibly dangerous for melee, so watch out. Additionally, they also cast Fell Frenzy, increasing nearby enemies' damage by 50% for 20 seconds. This can especially be dangerous in combination with the Bat Fixate. Next up is Smashspite. He occasionally casts Hateful Gaze on the furthest player. He will then charge towards them on cast finish, and the first player to get hit by it will stop the charge, take a big physical damage hit and a debuff, increasing subsequent damage by the same ability for 1 minute. You can either rotate the players to take the big hit, or your tank can take multiple stacks with big defensive CDs. Right after the charge, he will cast Earth-Shaking Stomp, an AoE hit and knock back to the group. Additionally, players will get fixated with a green orb above their heads by the bats flying around. After a few seconds, green puddles will spawn in a straight line from the bat to the player. Try to put the lines to the edges of the room and on top of existing ones to preserve space. After you defeat Smashspite, you can make your way up to the final stairs to the last boss. On your way there, you will deal with Risen Lancers and Swordsmen. The Lancers jump to nearby players, indicated by a big brown swirly on the ground. They do heavy damage on impact and stun any player hit. You can dodge the swirlies and also disrupt the cast with stuns and disorients. And the Swordsman only cast Coup de Grace, dealing physical damage to the tank, so be ready to use heavy mitigation if multiple casts go through. Now you're ready to fight Lord Kur'talos Ravencrest. In phase 1, Kur'talos occasionally throws a whirling blade at a random player. The blade will move back and forth between the boss and the player's position on cast finish. Make sure to position the blade in a way so it doesn't move across the whole room. And the tank should move the boss away from the blade to avoid melee players being hit. Additionally, Latosius appears somewhere at the edge of the room. He's not attackable and casts Shadow Bolts at random targets. Sometimes he will cast Dark Blast, which creates a straight line through the middle of the room from his position. To avoid this, check where Latosius is positioned beforehand, so you can preemptively avoid the area the blast is going through. Once Kur'talos reaches 20% HP, Latosius casts him aside and assumes his true form as a giant demon, Nantaloniax. In this phase, players gain a 300% HP, damage, and healing buff. The boss will cast 1 Shadow Bolt volley before the buff gets applied to the group, so make sure you use big defensive CDs to survive that first AoE cast. Each Shadow Bolt volley also leaves behind a dot on the whole party, so keep that in mind. Additionally, the boss also spawns green clouds around the room, and if a player gets in contact with them, they will fall asleep. The sleep debuff is a magic effect, so it can be dispelled, but still be very careful to not get hit. Once in a while, the boss also casts Stinging Swarm onto a player, and this swarm has to be killed quickly because the affected player takes heavy damage and occasionally gets stunned while the swarm is alive. The boss also has a time-based intermission, disappearing for 25 seconds and creating big straight lines moving either clockwise or counterclockwise from the initial spawn point. Get ready to use movement speed buffs to avoid getting hit. Be careful to not get caught in a green sleep puddle either, because you will quickly die to the beam otherwise. And that's it for Black Rook Hold. I really hope this guide helped you out and you learned a thing or two. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. And thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.